All right. Welcome everybody to Kitchen Sink Microscopy. Sorry we had a little last minute technical difficulties and our guest got called into work. So it was kind of a sign, I guess, that it wasn't meant to be this week. So we'll push that back to next week.
Yep.
But the album is out.
Oh, your
You can't
background
see it.
removal.
Stupid. Okay, I'm gonna take
Put it in
that
front
back.
of your shirt then. Try that.
There we
There.
go.
Hmm.
Pretty cool holding a vinyl
Yeah,
that you made.
it's pretty
Um,
awesome. Hmm.
but yeah, I mean, we can still kind of talk about uh the backstory of the album because there's kind of a central theme to it that we haven't really talked about in a long time, and that's suicide.
Yeah.
Um, how like the album's based on a friend of mine that took his life when we were just 19 years old, and I had told him, you know what, someday I'm going to write a concept album about you, and so that's kind of where this whole idea was born, and suicide is a touchy subject, but
It is, and
um,
even YouTube is sketchy about it.
yeah, and yeah, like I didn't even think about that. Yeah, they might kind of not like. Maybe they're the root cause of all the technical problems.
That could be, yeah.
They didn't want
Well,
it
I
getting
mean,
out.
it it's man, I don't know. Like I get where they're coming from, but it's like it's a subject that really should be discussed. And it
Right.
should be open to discussion without any kind of restrictions.
Well, and here's the thing about my album that's a little bit controversial, I think, is that I mean, it's not a true story. It's sci-fi, dystopian future sort of
Hmm.
stuff, of course.
Yeah.
But the main character is roughly based on my friend. And hi Victoria. And the the album isn't really focused on suicide.
No,
It's
no, it's
it's
like,
it's an emotional journey, and it's like
yeah.
end capped, like on either end with this concept. It's
Hmm.
like finding hope that pulls him away from suicidal thoughts, and then ultimately, like I don't want to give away the plot, but like ends up there anyway. But there's a little bit of a see, this is where it gets controversial. There's a little bit of a justification for it then.
Hmm.
And uh, I realize that is not a popular thing to say in regards to suicide because a lot of people just have this binary switch where they think it's just bad. Like, but
Well, we could also talk about like assisted suicide too, because like
right, yeah,
in many parts of the world and in many, I mean, just in general, there's a lot of people who think that in the right situation that is justified.
yeah. And I mean, so like
And it
in the
to me, it's
interim
like,
of like
oh,
beginning this album and then finally now finishing it, I had cancer twice. I went
hmm,
through a couple bouts of being suicidal myself.
hmm,
So, and I never, because of what Jeff did, when we were teenagers, I thought, oh, I'll never get to that point. Like I
hmm,
see what it did to his
yeah,
family and to me and, other friends of his and stuff. And, and yet it still happened. And
yeah,
and that I was able to turn that around and pour that into this album. Like
hmm,
the stuff that I'm trying to convey is coming from me, not from what I think Jeff would have thought.
yeah.
So it's a little bit about both of us in that way. Um,
Sure. Well, and I think that's important to share those kinds of stories because people who are in that situation themselves probably need to hear that they're not alone, you
yeah.
know? And
Well,
in that it's like this is why I think it's important to discuss it.
mhm. Do you remember when last year we interviewed Walter from Stabbing Westward?
Yeah.
And he mentioned how that one fan came up to him at a show and like hugged him and cried and
Hmm.
said, you know what, your music saved my life.
Yeah.
You know, that's see, for all the controversy in how I handle the story of this album, my hope is that it's able to at least uh do that for at least just one person, you know, like
That's it makes it worth it at that
yeah,
point.
to speak to them on a level that says, you know what, I'm not alone. There are people that understand this, and it doesn't have to be this way. Um,
Hmm.
because there is hope in the album, in the beginning of the album, you know, like
Yeah.
there's ups and downs in life, and that you know sometimes shit happens, and and just you know the way that Walter handled that, you know, like seeing how that emotionally affected him and how
Mm.
important that was to him to hear and stuff like that. Like, it takes me back to Jeff's suicide note where he said, "How could one man make a significant difference in the world?"
Yeah.
And that's how. Like, if this album, which is based on Jeff,
Hmm.
uh, is able to save another life, then he technically did change the world for someone, you know?
Yeah. True.
So, in a nutshell, it's
Yeah.
a it's a happy album, right?
Yeah. Sort of. Yeah. I mean, oh man, it is something though. It's like I don't know. I've never been there myself, so but it's like I've talked to a lot of people who have, and it's like I can't imagine that level of despair.
It's
And
it, it's it it's like a void
mm,
in inside you. Like for me, you know how I don't know, you know how like when you're laying in bed and it's really comfortable or whatever, and you just don't want to get up and go to work.
yeah.
I would have that sort of feeling with just like not breathing, you know, be
Mhm.
like, you know what, like I don't even feel like breathing right now. Like that's such a weird uh metaphysical dichotomy.
Yeah.
Like to be like, you know what, like what if I just turned off all my autonomic body responses and you know, whew,
Well, and it to me, I always think that even in the most hopeless situation, there is a way out. There is hope,
mhm.
and that's hard to see when you're on the inside. I can imagine. But
Yeah,
like looking from the outside, it's like, well, yeah, but that problem is not worth ending your life. Like your life is worth way more than like an X or some money or whatever, you know. Like
yeah,
that stuff is it doesn't have any actual value. So like why let that like because it's almost kind of like you're letting it win at
right.
that point.
Well,
And I guess in a sense, some people could say, well, now I'm actually taking control and winning, but you're not, are you? Right?
mhm. Yeah. I mean, hopefully we can do this the way we wanted to next week, but in the album story arc, um, you know, it's kind of about like a unrequited love, but of
Mm-hmm.
course, in the end, the loss of that love is not the direct cause of the ultimate end.
Yeah.
So there becomes like a an evident need for altruism, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
which you know when you think about it, like uh, I think we've talked about this before, but like altruism can effectively be uh, kind of a form of suicide. You know, like if like you jump in front of a bullet to save your own kid, I mean, you just killed yourself,
Yeah.
technically, you know.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
But, you know, when you say it that way, you sound like an asshole. But
Well, and
uh,
that maybe I think see because that's a situation that's kind of beyond your control. Like it's a
yeah.
circumstance that you didn't initiate and you're defending somebody essentially by using, you know, sacrificing yourself.
Mhm.
And I think that's different than when you're not in that situation and you're sacrificing yourself for whatever,
Right.
something that isn't an immediate thing.
Well, my aunt committed suicide after she had a stroke,
Mm-hmm.
and in her view, she was a burden on her family,
Mm-hmm.
and she thought she was doing them a favor.
And
Now,
in that, I can
that's a
definitely see that.
perspective thing,
No,
though.
and I agree that in that it's like I can absolutely see the rationale behind that. That is not an irrational thing. Plus,
Like
there's also
irreversible
people.
medical stuff does
Yeah.
definitely change the
Yep.
equation.
And yeah, like if you, I don't know, like your whole life is, I don't know, running, right? You're an athlete or something, and you suddenly have some kind of injury and you can never run again. That's really hard. What do you, I mean, sure, you could go on to do other things, but if your entire life revolved around that, I could
I
see
could,
somebody being like, well, now there's no meaning, you
yeah, but I
know?
mean, I could Google a picture in 2 seconds of a guy with no legs running,
Yep.
with
Running faster than
prosthetics.
people with legs,
Yeah.
you know?
So, I mean, like it's all about creativity sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Oh
of
yeah, I
course,
know people with like that are missing limbs that have a pretty full life,
mhm,
you know? It's like, well, okay, maybe you can't do everything exactly the same, but you can still have a pretty awesome life. Even people in wheelchairs and stuff. Like, I mean, Stephen Hawking, right?
yeah,
Like he was everybody knows his name,
right. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, he's a great example of perseverance over stuff like most people probably would rather die than go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Speaking to your point about passions, Beethoven
Mm-hmm.
lost his hearing.
Mm-hmm.
He still wrote music and performed
Yeah.
music.
Well, and some of the best music that he wrote was after he lost his hearing.
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, he didn't lose it 100%, but
Yeah.
like he had to put his ear on the piano while he was banging on it, and that's why like his music got a little heavier and kind of
yeah.
birthed heavy metal, I think.
Metal. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah. Uh, so stuff like that does definitely show that there are creative ways around things, and of course it's going to suck and it's not going to be the same, but
yeah.
you can still sort of participate
Mm-hmm. Well, and
and
there's the situations that are more like transient things that people will kill themselves over. But it's like, you got to recognize that everything will pass.
mhm,
Everything, no matter what. Well, no, okay, maybe there's situations that, like, I don't know, you're in prison for the rest of your life. I could see, like, okay, well, you're not getting out there. So I
yeah.
could I could see a justification in that regard. But most things that cause despair in people are not permanent,
Mhm.
and there's a way out. And I think this, oh boy, like, I don't know, maybe like money problems, right? Some people will off themselves over money problems. And
Right.
a lot of times that just comes down to, well, for one, so you could get out of every situation when it comes to money. There's always a way, always.
Mhm.
And maybe that's a failing of our education system, and that people are never given the tools to be able to figure out their way out of those kinds of circumstances. Um, but and relationships, it's like, come on, man. I mean, there are I have like there are a lot of girlfriends that like, we broke up at some point in time, and I was really sad and down and stuff. But it's like now I think back and I'm like, I'm kind of glad I'm out of that situation, actually.
Right.
that that kind of sucked.
It's too bad you can't like pull out a crystal ball and have a quick conversation with your future self sometimes, like,
Yep.
like, hey, is this ever really like clear up? And your future self would probably be like, oh shit, I barely remember that thing,
Yeah.
like
Like, wait a minute, who? What? Show me a picture because I've totally forgotten about that person.
Oh, here's an interesting comment. This too shall pass was meant to be a warning against pride, not a balm for misery.
Sure. Well, and I
Yeah.
suppose it works in either situation.
Yeah. Huh. That does
It's a
actually
good point.
work in both. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very versatile statement.
Yeah. Turns it into a bit more of a bummer thing to say to somebody though, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, I'm really proud of myself for you know, putting out this album. And
Hmm.
somebody's all like, yeah, but you'll get over it.
Yeah, you'll be forgotten.
Yeah. No one's gonna buy it anyway. No one's gonna
Yep.
click on that link down there and go buy it.
Oh man.
Probably gonna rain.
Yep. Well, and I would thinking about it, I think stoicism is another thing. Like I'm big on that, and I think that's a good tool to have in your toolbox before you land on something that brings you into sadness and despair.
Yeah.
Because then you can kind of, it's sort of like, it's like training, right? Like military training or whatever, or any kind of training for that matter. Like when you've practiced, you don't really think, you just do. You fall back on your training. You kind of automatically just do the things that you've practiced. And you could do that with your life too, just circumstances and things like having these tools and practicing and working. I mean, Stoics often would practice putting themselves in miserable circumstances intentionally to just be able to work through that, and that way they're experienced now in handling those kinds of situations. So when they do come up on their own naturally, now you're like, oh yeah, I know what this is all about.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing. That's
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this on purpose.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, I think it's a good thing to do too, because like, um, I mean, within reason, but
Well, I did
certainly.
actually do that to an extent. Like
Mhm.
after after my first like suicide attempt thing, I spent a little time in a mental hospital and kind of addressed the root cause as being uh, lonely.
Mhm.
Like I just couldn't stand like being kind of cut off from people or, not having like a meaningful connection sort of relationship with somebody and um I had never lived alone at that
Mhm.
point and um and I had just moved out on my own
Mhm.
right before that. So like that was like new territory for me.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's going through that herself currently, and
Yeah.
and really
But then I
struggling.
moved to Memphis where like I
Yeah.
knew one person,
Yeah.
and I
Well,
wasn't living with him.
and
He
I
had his
like
own life.
to yeah, for me it's like I've been living alone, geez, for a long time now, and I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, I don't, I love having people around, but I love being alone at the same time. Actually, that's another Stoic principle too, is like, spending time alone with yourself, and, not relying on the distraction of others to keep you entertained or whatever, that kind of thing. That you are your own best friend essentially.
Yeah.
And I feel that way about myself. I have no problem spending a lot of time alone. I love staying in contact with people, but like, man, I could go a whole day just hanging out by myself, just chilling. Of course, I can't avoid my cat. He's Mr. Budinsky, so I can't avoid that. But still, um, just sitting there doing something by myself, just driving around or whatever. Like I find that enjoyable.
Many
But not
human
everybody does.
pastimes were designed to be enjoyed alone, like
Mhm.
angling, golf, and the all-time number one.
Always a way to throw Red Dwarf into the mix. Yeah. We have another comment too. Well, there's two. It was a quote on a Roman king's ring, um, about the this too shall pass. Wasn't trying to be a downer, just the idea of regulating the highs so the lows aren't so devastating. This is true. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
No, that's actually a very, very important point. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think I do kind of try to live by that mantra. I'm a very reserved person in my reactions
Mm-hmm.
to good things. Um,
Yeah.
and there's probably a many layers to why that is, but um, on the flip side of things, like I don't completely lose my shit if things are going bad. Like I tend to approach that in a calm way too.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, then there's like little things that'll totally set me off. So,
And those are things to work on, I suppose.
yeah, I mean, some of that might be like an autism thing, maybe, but um, that doesn't mean to say that it still can't be worked on. Um,
Well, yeah, you can always work on things. Anything that's psychological.
yeah,
I mean, maybe you can't eliminate something, but you can at least mitigate it.
right.
You know, find
Or
a way to.
find a path around it or something.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that should be the first thought people go to when they're feeling suicidal is like, where's the path of least resistance that doesn't involve ending up dead?
Yeah.
Like sometimes the path of least resistance is death, and you might
Mm-hmm.
just be inclined to go for the low-hanging fruit, but there are other ways,
Sure.
usually anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, uh, I tell you, it surprised the hell out of me to find myself in that situation after my friend had committed suicide at such a young age, because I thought my brain was already programmed to do that. So it's like you kind of got to keep checking yourself, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, because it is possible to slide backwards a bit in
Mm-hmm.
progress too. So,
Sure. And the other thing is, there could be a lot of unexpected things that you didn't see coming,
mhm,
that might, like throw a curveball or something.
yeah.
But I think it's like, uh, I don't know. I'm trying to collect my thoughts on how to, I don't know, phrase what I'm thinking of. It'll come to me eventually.
Well, yeah, our lined up guest for today was he was also a friend of Jeff's, and he definitely went through some periods of similar uh valleys, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so hopefully he'll be on next week, and we can kind of revisit it with his perspective on things too.
Definitely. Yeah, that'd be great. Well, and I think this is the thing. No one is immune,
No.
no matter what. And like, but in that, it's also kind of a bit of hope, right? Because it's like, even the, like, if you're worried about money and you're about to take your own life because of it, it's like, well, even the most wealthy person could be in the same situation as you know
Right.
and
Yeah.
so it I don't know, I'm trying to figure out again, I have
Well,
this
like Kurt,
notion in
Kurt
my head.
Cobain, for instance,
Kurt
like,
Cobain, yeah. Mm-hmm.
well, I mean, he's not the only one, but there are plenty of celebrities that do commit suicide, and
Oh, Jeffrey Epstein. But we all know the truth there. We know my Wi-Fi is the name, the SSID is Epstein didn't kill himself.
Nice. But yeah, like that's actually a huge misconception that just having money instantly equals happiness.
I would say it actually equals the opposite in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I mean,
There are a lot of wealthy people who are the most lonely individuals on the planet, very sad and unhappy and stuff.
it's yeah, it's not that money doesn't buy happiness.
Mm-hmm.
It's more that like a lack of money uh doesn't afford you the ability to easily attain happiness.
Well, no, you're right. There's a threshold, right?
Like
And
if your needs aren't being met, this is like the Maslow thing, right?
yeah.
You know, it's kind of a given that you're just not going to be happy, and it's not really like a choice you make.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a situation that you're in, you know.
Yeah, yeah. If you can't manage to like cover the basics and have like a little bit extra to do
The
something fun every once in a while.
This
um
comment, I was just about to get to that too. Diminishing
oh,
returns.
that was what I was getting to as well, in that
Yep.
you hit a certain threshold depending on where you live. And you maybe, let's say, I don't know, in Tacoma, if I were to make $100,000, I'd be doing okay. 100K a year, I'd be doing pretty all right.
Mhm.
Cover everything that I need and have a little extra, have a few toys, have a little bit of fun. But then if I made 200,000, it's like, okay, well, yeah, I could buy a few more things, but like once you hit like $1 million a year, then it's kind of like, well, what, $2 million now, double that? You're
Yeah.
actually not doing that much better, and you can't really do that much more. It's like,
Right.
oh, okay, well, now I just have more money, and I guess I buy a bigger boat. I don't know. but
Yeah.
but it doesn't really bring you any more joy. Like it what like for, this goes back to like kind of my own personal philosophy about a lot of things. Like it's the simple things. Like, yeah, I have a sailboat. It's a small sailboat, a little sailing yacht. And but I also have like a fairly inexpensive inflatable dinghy, like a, not a rigid inflatable, but like just a 10-foot dinghy and a little 6 horsepower motor.
Your
Um,
dinghy's not rigid?
well, not right now. That would be weird. um, I used to have a Zodiac, actually, so that was the rigid one.
Hmm.
Those are awesome. But just a little boat, that's really fun to take out. That's actually probably more fun than taking out a big, huge boat. And honestly, if you had, I wouldn't. If I were like a billionaire, I wouldn't want a giant, huge yacht, that requires a whole staff and crew and all this maintenance and everything. And it's like I just want to go out by myself, or maybe with a buddy. We'll go fishing or something like that, or sail around the world or whatever. Like I don't want a whole crew. You know,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah, and that's why like I recently put out a Facebook post and it didn't get any attention and I kind of knew it wouldn't because I think it's an algorithm thing. People
Mm-hmm.
probably just didn't even see it, but it was basically calling out billionaires. And this is all based on this diminishing returns thing
Mm-hmm.
and happiness and so on. Like, you know, there's so much misery in the world because of a lack of money.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's these people that like they could lose 99% of their fortune and still be the richest person in in the world or in their country or wherever, like whatever metric they want to stack it against, they're still better off than 99.999% of people, like
This is true. This is, yeah. Well, now the thing is, we're talking the here and now for living individuals, but everybody dies. So that fortune
right.
will be let go at some point in time. And almost everybody who has a fortune has it slated to go to charities or some kind of foundation or something like that. That's very, very common. Um, and
Yeah,
so,
but I feel like with here's the thing the challenge I was posing is that, like Yes, a progressive tax would definitely do a country a great service for providing services and stuff. But it's also an undeniable fact that there's waste and corruption and fraud
Yeah.
and all that
Yep.
stuff that you really just can't get around. Um, and you're even going to find that in charities and
Hmm.
charity's a lot of bullshit when it comes to these rich people anyway, because they're only doing that to get this tax loophole where they can donate shares that they're holding to some charity and then write that off. And then
Hmm.
whatever they would have paid in tax for that, they just buy more shares of the next thing and they
Sure, sure. Well,
increase the
but who cares about intent if the effect is positive, right? Like,
Yeah, but I mean that's
I want to
the
address
effect,
this
and
comment too.
it's not really putting as much out into the world as they could be,
No,
you
no.
know.
And maybe there's ways we could. Well, let's discuss that in a second. I want to address this comment here.
Hmm.
Two comments back. Where I'm at, 10K would be a life altering chunk of money. So much yet so little, and it makes me think of a song by Arrested Development, Mr.
Hmm.
Wendell, one of my favorite songs. I fucking love that song. Where he says $2 means a snack to me, but it means a big deal to you. Talking about the homeless guy, um, and it's like, yeah, you know, the, it depends on where you are. Like,
Right.
where I'm at, $10,000 would be a pretty big deal. Like a bump in pay up 10K would I'd actually be able to save money,
Yeah.
that'd be nice. And so, but for somebody who's making, I don't know, $250,000 a year, $10,000 bump would be nothing. It'd be like, oh, that'd be like if you're making $10 an hour and you were now making $10.10.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, that's a 10-cent raise. Wow.
Hmm. And so yeah, like my thinking was, yeah, tax would be great and all, but I think it would be better if there was just like a collective culture among these rich people to say, hey, you know what? Like instead of charities, like why don't we just go directly to the source and help small businesses thrive instead
that,
of
that would be good.
going to public companies and charities and stuff like that. Like, charities are okay, but there are also like big charity and all that stuff
Mm-hmm.
and waste and fraud that goes on there.
I,
So, uh,
I like that. Well, now direct action is obviously better than having a
mhm,
middleman or some kind of managed system with a bureaucratic structure. Um, Actually, there's another comment I want to address too, which was related to the previous one. But like if I'm just thinking like, oh, if I were a billionaire, right? Honestly, if I just like, I don't know, somehow became a billionaire, I don't really want a lot out of life. I kind of like the simple things. And
right.
so, but I do want to help people. That's the biggest thing.
Mhm,
So, and you were saying, earlier that um it the lack of money like around the world and stuff, which is true, but it's also to a large extent a lack of resources that is a huge part of the problem. And
but the money
so,
buys those resources.
and that's where it's like what I was saying. If I were a billionaire, I'd bring water to the desert, that kind
Right.
of thing.
Well,
And
exactly. Exactly. So that was my challenge. My
mm-hmm,
challenge was, um, like if these billionaires, if any one billionaire
mm-hmm,
took 99, like liquidated all their stocks and everything, 99% of their wealth and allotted that to helping lift humanity up, get
mm-hmm.
people off the streets, get people health and food and all this stuff, empowering them to do what they want to do in their life, to be the next Einstein,
Mm-hmm.
to, join the workforce and have energy and vigor and find happiness and contribute to the world and reduce suicides and all that stuff. All that could be done with all that money,
Well,
and
it
they'd
could.
still have like $10 billion they could just fucking retire with and never worry about running out of money, you know?
This is true. This is true, and I some people do that. That does get done, but maybe not to the scale that it could. I see, like what I would do, you couldn't fix the whole world all at once, even if you're a billionaire. It would require a lot of work and resources to be able to do that. But you could at least tackle one area at a
Right.
time. Like, okay, some people, they're like, okay, let's do something in Africa and stuff, right? Now, like I said, bring water to the desert, right
Yeah.
there. There you go. Clean water is huge in a lot of areas, like throughout the world. Actually, access to clean water is a big deal, and basic medicine, that's a big deal. Like treatment of things, so you could take care of that pretty easily, and then like then I would open schools like
Yeah. Yeah.
that, because it it's the resources combined with knowledge that are the keys to lifting everybody up. um in my opinion, at least,
Right.
that like if
And
people know how to do things and they know like as much as possible, it's like, okay, well, you could tackle any situation you encounter with knowledge. Knowledge allows you to basically be able to overcome any situation.
yeah.
And so combined with access to resources, of course.
Yeah.
um,
But yeah, so to cap off what I was talking about with the challenge is that I challenged any billionaire to give me just 0.5% of their wealth, and I will use 99% of that to fix all like the hunger and homelessness in Washington state and like Oregon and California, like three
mhm.
states, right?
Yeah.
In 5 years or something like that. I forget if I said 3 or 5 years or something. And I said, like, if that works, I want you to pledge to do the same thing with your 99%.
Mhm.
And if it fails, I'll invest the remaining 10 million or whatever in Tesla and Amazon or some shit, like I'll sell out. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, and
But
like
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 that would be a proof of concept, like on a relatively small scale,
yeah.
with a very tiny fraction of what kind of power they would have,
Hmm.
and how much good that could do. Like,
Well,
uh,
how much just Seattle spends alone on the homelessness.
yeah,
It's like $200 million a year or something stupid
there
like that.
are plenty of ideas that
How
just need money behind them
how is
to
it
fix things.
possible that, well, I know how it's possible that $200 million doesn't actually, like, it's like gets worse. It's because, well, it's government, that's why. But like with that amount of money, there's so many things you could do. Now, you can't get rid of it all. Like, you can't, everybody, you're not going to have no homeless people or no hungry people. It's going to exist regardless of how much effort you put in.
I
uh,
mean, there are places in Europe that pretty much have, I mean, here in Germany, it's all voluntary to be homeless, and
and
you
that's
hardly ever see anybody doing that.
and this is where analysis comes in. Like, okay, well, let's look at things and figure out why. Because yeah, there are a lot of places around the world where there's hardly any homelessness, and then there's places where there's a lot. So why is that? And I mean, there could be cultural reasons, there could be other factors at play. Obviously, like uh, the economy certainly is a factor.
Oh,
Uh,
it's a big factor.
yeah. Well, like economic opportunity is the biggest factor, I think, there, but mental health too. Because it's like, I think mental health is a major player in homelessness, and so having uh like access to assistance to help people who have mental health issues is vital. I mean, and it's not just homelessness. Look at like all the crime, for part of it, like, well, mass shootings, for instance. There's a lot of mental health relating to that. Um, but homelessness and maybe even just poverty in general too, because poverty could also be connected to mental health. Um, that's,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know,
I don't think it's as big a part as you would think. And I say that just because like the I think the only people here in Germany that are homeless, it is a mental health issue, but they also have freely available access to get help for that mental health.
mhm.
So there's probably a good chunk of people that are actually taking advantage of that. But it really just depends on your flavor of mental health, right? Like
True. Yeah.
there are some people you really can't just like make a connection with to get them to see on that level,
Well,
right?
and that's where you have to have an intelligent system that's adaptive to whatever situation. Because, like, yeah, everybody's different. Their circumstances are different, and you can't have a one size fits all solution. And that's the government aspect. It's like, oh, we're just going to do this one cool trick, and that's going to solve it all. Like, okay, no, you're an idiot if you think that. Like, there are many, many factors at play, and you have to be able to understand those and comprehend them and take care of each person on an individual basis. But well, they don't want to do that because that requires effort.
Here's a good point in the comments. Are we talking mental health or shit life syndrome? Because
Well, and
so,
yeah.
yeah, like yeah, going back to the suicide thing, it's like, there can be a lot of shit on your shoulders,
Mhm.
and maybe one of those things will be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and it's really hard to see a way out of that one thing when you're also trying to see a way out of like 90 other things.
Well, and here's something we should definitely address too when we're talking suicide: PTSD.
Hmm.
Um, that there's a large number of veterans who take their own lives because of their experiences in combat, like how it affected them, and like that really isn't being handled very well. In fact, because I think I'd mentioned before the police activity YouTube channel, which is like a lot of body cam uh, footage of cops engaging with people. Yeah, there was a veteran who he like broke up with his girlfriend, and that was kind of like the end point. And he just basically decided he was going to go out suicide by cop, and he did. Like they ended up having to shoot him because he went for his rifle, and it's like, God, it just breaks my heart,
Yeah.
because it's like if only he got some help, or maybe, hey, here's an idea: maybe don't send people to a senseless war. Here's a good idea because it's like, you know, you can see shit happen in combat, but if it's justified, then you could be like, well, at least I was, doing it for the betterment of people, like helping people in some way. But like
Yeah.
if there's no reason whatsoever why, it's like the Vietnam veterans, dude, man.
Well, so there's PTSD, and then they had to go and make something worse. So then there's CPTSD.
Mm-hmm,
But I think people also often overlook in between,
mm-hmm.
there's a lot of health problems that you can get from prolonged stress.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm,
Like, uh, what is it? Cushing's syndrome can be induced by too much cortisol in the blood for too long.
mm-hmm,
Um, there's a thing called, um, the name escapes me at the moment, but it has to do with your cortisol levels being high for too long.
mm-hmm,
And all of a sudden, like just random shit in your body just kind of starts acting all haywire.
mm-hmm.
And then you're stuck trying to figure out what the hell's wrong with me. Do I have cancer? Like, am I going crazy? Uh, and like all that stuff is is just a product of life being too fucking hard, harder than it needs to be, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And for no fault of their own either. Like they're working two jobs. It's not that they're not working hard or trying hard enough, like
Mm-hmm.
they're doing all they can. It's still not enough. I've been there, you know?
Yeah.
And like uh, I can definitely say like now that I'm not rich, but I'm at least in a place where like don't have to struggle that
Yeah.
much. And it's such a relief. Like,
Well, because you hit that threshold. That's
yeah,
the thing. And
yeah,
that, but I would say, see, in my opinion, um, we should, because there's several different approaches to managing this particular thing. Some people, there's the angle where people say, well, okay, well, people need to make more money. And I actually disagree with that. I think people need, like, costs need to come down.
right,
That's like the key thing. We don't need to make more money because it's like chasing the rainbow. The costs keep going up. That's the problem. Like,
right.
we
And
need
the
costs to
corporate world
stabilize.
makes it so that it's not really possible for prices to come down. So
What does?
the corporate world is,
Yes. Well, and the government, the two are,
hmm,
they're buddy buddy like that. And that's something that has to be addressed. And I think because people are like, oh, we need to make more, raise the minimum wage, raise the minimum wage. Like, it's like in the episode of Star Trek TNG, like, more power to the shields, more power, and it just keeps whipping them harder and harder. Like, no, let's take a different approach.
yeah,
you know, because the problem is the costs going up. That's why people need to make more. We need to make the costs come down,
hmm,
or at least stop, like
yeah,
stabilize. So at least wages can catch up, and people at least can feel like, oh, well, if I save money, like, oh, what I can buy today with this amount of money, I can buy tomorrow with the same amount of money.
right,
Like, that used to be more of a thing, and now it's not. It's like, oh yeah, you could save and save and save, but by the time you've saved up enough for a down payment on a house, the house is like 5 times more expensive. So now your money's worthless.
right.
Like that kind of thing.
Yeah, and then they want to stimulate the economy, so they raise the interest rates on houses. I'm like, what?
That it should be they need to stop meddling in the economy. That's the problem. That
Right.
things were fine until the Federal Reserve was created in the U.S. And actually, well, what do you know? That it was created to like prevent recessions and depressions and things like that. But almost immediately after it was created, the Great Depression happened. Like, oh, huh, that's weird. Like, oh, so it's a useless entity, right? But it's been hurting people ever since. Getting off the gold standard, that sucked. Like, we should go back to that. Like, if costs can just be stable, then things will sort themselves out. But
Hmm.
like the fact that the Federal Reserve has a mandate for a minimum 2%, or like a around 2% inflation, and like, well, wait a minute, what? So the government is intentionally making prices go up. I mean,
Right.
you detect a small problem there.
Hmm.
Like, why?
Yeah, the whole idea that money can just accumulate more and more and more over time for everybody doesn't work mathematically on paper. You know, that's why they keep printing more money and blah blah blah. So
Yeah, we need to have, like, deflation is really what we need.
yeah,
Um, at least for now. That would be nice to see deflation happen for a few years and then just stop.
well, going back a few comments here, um, they don't need money, poor people. They need resources.
Mm-hmm.
Stop locking real things behind imaginary value. Billionaires are exploitive, ex, exploitative, exploitative. Yeah. Billionaires exploit people by nature.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get that rich without exploitation, and that's a great point, because that's why the system is the way it is. It's not, they don't keep it working the way it works because it works well. It just works well for some.
Well,
And
for the elites, essentially.
yeah,
But
and they have the ability to buy their way through governments, and so
and
it's
that
like,
is a huge problem, like lobbying and shit like that.
right.
But I don't think necessarily. I wouldn't say that one could assume automatically that because somebody has a bunch of money, that they got that by exploiting somebody. Because you could also get that money by providing a really good service that people want, right? And that's not bad.
Uh,
I don't want this to get into an economic debate, but we could talk about that later.
yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it's math, you know, like there's definitely exploitation because their workforce isn't climbing the ladder with the rest of the company.
So
You
how,
know, that
okay,
equals exploitation.
I
It's
would like
not
to
fair.
see evidence of that, because I know a lot of people who work for big corporations who are making plenty of money. You know, they're doing just fine, six-figure salaries and stuff like that. And so it's like, okay, well, and it's a voluntary workforce too. If you feel
I'd like to
exploited,
see evidence of that, like
well,
on a large scale,
well,
because
no, but
that's
here's
that's anecdotal.
if you have at will employment, then if you don't like your working conditions or your pay, you can just go work somewhere else, right?
Yeah, but all of them do it. All of
Not
them exploit the labor. That's how you get
okay.
billions.
Okay. Well,
That's
yeah, but
why
see, yeah,
psychotics
this
are
is
the
where,
only people that become billionaires.
well,
Like,
not entirely. I
I don't know why you defend billionaires so much.
I'm
Like
not
like
defending. I'm just trying. I'm looking at things from a pragmatic, like rational standpoint of just like, okay, what am I looking at here? Like, I don't have any preconceptions about anything. I'm just saying, like,
hmm,
from my perspective, when I'm looking at it, this is what I see. Um,
but what how's it a pragmatic open interpretation if you're not willing to examine the possibility that exploitation is happening?
no, I already have, and I found that not to be necessarily true.
So you haven't seen all the data about people's wages and like all you have to do is
No,
go look for a job at Amazon and look at what they're paying.
well,
And then look
okay,
at how much money Amazon makes on the
then,
whole.
well,
That
but
if
that
you think about all the numbers along the string, somewhere along the line, that's not adding up correctly. And that's
I wouldn't
exploitation.
consider that exploitation. If you are making enough money at a job, which obviously, if you continue working at that job, you're making enough money, because if you weren't, you'd be out of a house. You wouldn't be able to work. You wouldn't have gas money or whatever, bus fare. So obviously, you're making enough to get by. And isn't that sort of like the goal, right? The minimum goal is to get
Well,
by.
remember what we were talking about? People having two jobs and they still don't have enough. That's not because they're making enough. They don't hold their job because they're making enough. They hold
Well,
their job because they need to be making at least that much
and here
and
we
then more,
go. This is the
you know,
crux of what I was saying before. Why do they need to make that much?
because things cost a lot.
Yes. Yes, that's
Yeah.
the thing. We need to fix that, not the other, because
No, no, no.
there is there. Okay, look,
You're doing a thing that
hold on a
earlier
second.
you said makes a person an idiot. You're saying we do this one thing and not several things. Like you're right and I'm right. Both of these things need to happen.
Well,
Wages need to come up and costs need to come down
this is
because
true, but
what's happening is there's like this huge gap where people are like super fucking rich and they don't need like any of it, but people like you defend them to be like, oh, well, they earned it and they get to keep it and do
no,
whatever they want with it.
I'm not
And then
defending.
there's
Well,
people that are just like starving to death, and you're like, yeah, well, they need to work two
see,
jobs then.
you have an assumption. Again, we're getting off topic here, but you
I
have
mean,
this
it all
assumption
wraps
that
into
I'm.
suicide because it drives people to suicide, you know? It
Well, and
really
I
does.
think it's the comparison is the thief of joy, is the saying. And I think if you are doing, I mean, it's like I
It's not
kind of
comparison. It's not comparison at
you're
all.
just saying there's these people making a bunch of money and there's other people not.
But it's not a comparison out of like the saying that you're talking about is more like, ah, oh, he's got a bigger dick than I do, and that makes me sad. You know, that's that's the kind of comparison that that's relating to. But being like, you know what, all these people are like screwing us all over and reaping the benefits from it. That's not a comparison of like envy. It's a comparison of like being pissed off at the injustice.
Well, you can. Okay, let's separate the because like
Make it make sense that there's an
screwing us
injustice.
over for sure, because there could be like people with means, connections, the elites and stuff can do things that us, you know, uh, regular people can't do, like can affect change in that way. Which certainly, yes, that's a big problem. But the mere existence of a person with a bunch of resources does not mean that it's like as long as you're doing okay, then what does it matter, right?
So many
It,
people are not doing okay.
but they're not
It doesn't
like
matter if
okay.
I'm
So
doing okay. It matters if the rest of my human beings are
well,
doing okay.
and I
Like
think
there's
maybe
always a problem to be fixed. Like you can't rest on your laurels and say, there's no problem with the billionaires because I'm not starving. Like that's incredibly like inward thinking.
no. I'm not saying that, but I'm like okay. I think it depends on how you view an economy, um, because in my analysis, an economy is not a zero sum game. Like, so if I earn a dollar, it's not because I took it from somebody else, like against their will. It's because I exchanged something that they were willing to give me. And that's generally how economic processes work, at least in a vacuum, right? Like if human beings were left to their own devices, that's how everything operates. And so if you know, man,
Well, okay, answer me this. If you give somebody a dollar,
mhm.
but oh, I paid all my bills, I don't have a dollar left, I can't give you a dollar, you can't get the service that they provided for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, shit, out of luck. So the the thing that's predicated on giving a dollar to a person in exchange for a service is by yourself first having an excess that
Well,
you could spend because it's not earmarked for something else.
this is true. Yeah.
So that's like you're right, it's not zero sum because like it's also about like capping how much excess there is because the more excess one person has, the less excess is available for everybody else. Like
Nope.
it's simple,
Nope.
simple. Like this is a physical thing.
This is why. Okay.
Like if
This is
I
why
have
we.
two pens here,
Yes.
right, and these two, and I take this one pen over here, there's
Mhm.
no longer two pens here. Like it's
Yeah.
that
Well,
you just
and
expand that, and that's how
so
simple it is to wrap your head
this is
around.
this is why we disagree then, because it, like I said, it depends on how you view an economy. And I totally disagree with you on the pens. That's not how economies work. It's completely different. But
I mean, that's how a
well,
natural economy would
now,
work. It's not how our economy works.
well, in well, and that's government. Honestly, really, the biggest problem there is government. And honestly, I would say a lot of people's woes you can trace back to the source, and the source is the government. In one way or another, the government is ultimately responsible. Government actions are responsible for your almost all of your woes. Now, obviously, you can't say physical woes, right? Like you get in a car accident, that's not the government's fault or something, or you get cancer or whatever. Well, that could be the government's fault, depending.
Well,
Like,
so could the accident if they have a bunch of fucking roundabouts everywhere.
yes, this is true. Yeah, well, and I mean, well, and getting back to like exploitation, I don't like that word because, well, there for several reasons, but we could say greed. Greed is one factor, but you know who's greedy too? The workers. The workers want more. The employer wants more. Like
That
that.
no, see, you're 100% wrong on that. That there's a difference between
100%.
greed.
You're that
Yeah,
certain, huh?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
If greed is about excess, it's not about just more. Like if you're working one job and you don't have enough money to pay your bills, you're saying that person is greedy because they want more money.
Well, I think
That's
everybody
what you're
wants.
saying, isn't it?
Okay. All right. Let's take it.
You're saying that's the exact same thing as greed versus somebody being like, I've got a million here and you're struggling, but this is my million, like that's greed.
Well, I mean, but
Out
no,
and out greed. That's
nobody
the
is entitled to
textbook
something that you
definition of
worked
greed.
for. Nobody is entitled to something you worked for. If I built a house myself with my own hands, other people are not entitled to live there. I built that house. That's my house, right?
These
Like
these
just
these
because I
billionaires
have
aren't
extra
doing
space.
the fucking work. Sorry to break that to you, but
What's that?
these billionaires aren't doing the work. They aren't earning this money.
Well, that's a broad assumption. That's
No, no, no.
broad
Earning
strokes right
earning
there.
money is you work for money. You
You,
work.
what you don't think that
Your
they
labor is exchanged, money, time,
you're
labor.
thinking like work is working in the fields, but what about like or working in a factory? But what
Even if it's
you have
brain work.
cerebral work too. That's actually more
Yeah,
effort in
yeah.
a lot of
I'm
ways.
I'm I absolutely agree with you. But still, they're not doing the work that equates to that money.
How so? You,
Well,
who
it,
decides? Do you decide?
yeah,
Really?
absolutely.
What?
Yeah.
Well, no,
I-
value,
we
value.
all make that decision. It's just
I
some of us are licking boots and letting people exploit us and be like, yeah, I should make $10,000 every second. Like
well,
I work really hard up here and it's $10,000 a second. That's just how much it costs.
see,
Like
there's
that's
a
bull.
lot of emotive argumentation right there that I'm detecting.
No,
Uh,
I'm worked up, but it's not an emotional argument. It's a fucking like it's rational. Like
well, see,
how
here's
do
the
how
thing.
do you
Okay,
ascribe that much value to 1 second of a
val-
person's life?
value is always subjective. Value is subjective
Exactly.
100% of the
And that's
time.
why I get to decide that that's bullshit.
Well, you
It's
can, but
subjective.
then other people say that that's not bullshit. Well, okay, let's
But
distill this
why would
down.
you? Why
Let us,
would you be such a simp?
okay,
You know?
okay, we're good. Come on, Jesus.
No,
Let's
it's true.
distill
Like
it down, huh?
that behavior is just it's ridiculous. It's not helpful to humankind.
Well, why don't we
It's
distill
it's
this
quite the
down
opposite. It's
to,
detrimental.
okay, well, hold on. I mean, because sometimes I feel like we live on different planets when it comes to certain subjects. But why don't we distill this down to just a simple, basic transaction, okay, between two people? Because this is when I'm talking about like greed, but that's just a word. It could be there could be a better word, but that's just a word that's coming to mind. Um, Maybe desire, I don't know. But so you have a garage sale and you put a price tag on something, and somebody comes up and they see the price and they're like, well, would you take this much for it? Or like you're selling a car on Craigslist or something, you negotiate a price, and then somewhere, because obviously you want to get as much money as you can for that thing, even if you're like charging like what it was new, even though it's really old and used. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Right? This thing that cost $100 10 years ago that you've worn out practically, if you could get $100 again, that would be great. um and then this other person, they want a deal, so they're like, well, I want to pay as little as possible and you want to get as much as possible, so like, and then you kind of meet in the middle. And that's how employment generally works. In fact, a lot of jobs, they didn't just tell me how much I got paid. It was like a negotiating process. So they'd be like, we offer this. And I'd be like, well, how about that? And they're like, well, that's too much. And I'm like,
But
all
that's
right, well,
negotiated at one single point. Like you kind of lose that leverage once you accept the job. Like if you've ever tried to negotiate a larger raise after you've already, begun at whatever salary, they're like, yeah, we can, we work with percentages. And if
that's
you work
true.
with
But
percentages, the lower you start, the less chance you've got of ever
th-
climbing,
this is true.
and
However,
that
you can always leave. You always have that ability to walk away
yeah,
from it.
but
And that
it's
is
not like
leverage
there's a
too.
magical
If,
rainbow land of just like places where you can just walk in and instantly have the job you want at the price that you want. Like
of course not.
it's
Of
not
course not.
like that at all.
Now that may be also the government could be kind of a
I mean,
cause of that.
I think that's just kind of the way of things, like the
Well,
market.
no. No,
Like
because
you're
you know what?
explaining, like people want to make a certain amount of money and stuff,
Sure. But here's
but
the
like
thing.
at a certain point that
You
expands and inflates beyond
okay. Oh, hold
reasonable.
on. So um well, we're kind of focused here on employment as the only option. The greatest option, of course, is self-employment, which the government doesn't like. Of course, we ran a business. I ran several businesses, and they make it very difficult to run a business or to freelance. But still, a lot of people do that. You always have that option, and that comes back to knowledge, and that's a failing of the education system, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
but yeah, don't forget the other complications with that. Like there's no safety net in that,
no, there
so
doesn't
there's
have
a
to
lot
be.
of risk.
There is.
And now you're competing with these big giants,
Mm-hmm.
like Amazon or whatever.
Well, you're not. I'm not talking about selling things. You could provide a service.
Whatever it is, like the market is already like there's so very seldom a gap of unmet need in today's market. Like that's
No,
one thing
that's.
I've noticed. Like,
I don't believe that's true because it's a matter of figuring out that there are unmet needs all over the place that no one's even thinking of. That in fact you could create a new need if you're clever enough.
yeah, I mean, like I'm looking at starting a second business right now
Mm-hmm.
and finding that, oh, all these great ideas, guess what? They've already been done. Like
Mm-hmm.
like the markets are saturated with great ideas, and a lot of them do end up failing because
Mm-hmm.
they can't really compete against these bigger names out in the market. Like the small businesses are getting pushed out. Like
Well,
that's
yes.
another angle of the exploitation. Like this is all coming back to my challenge. This is why I want it's about autonomy. Like at some point, like a person with too much greed needs to have the autonomy taken away from them and do the Robin Hood thing. Because like what else can you do? You can ask nicely, you can try to tax them. Oh, the government's bought out by the rich person, so they're not going to get taxed. Like whatever avenue you try, there's something there to thwart it. Like
Well, who? Why are you the one
people
who
like you and
can?
I, we're billionaires, we would be giving it to small businesses and things like that.
Yeah,
But they don't. Why is that? Why
because
wouldn't
because
why
they don't
wouldn't
have
you want
to.
to help the economy that got them to where they are,
Well, a lot of people do. There are a
No,
lot of
like make me a list of like three people that are doing
Carnegie.
what I'm talking about.
Carnegie is a good example of one. Basically, gave all that, like, started that charitable organization using all that wealth that he acquired. There's several. A lot of libraries used to be created by the wealthy, free libraries. Now they're government run, but used to be people with a lot of wealth would give back to the community in that regard. Hospitals, things like that. I mean, I'm
We
bad
didn't
with
used to have
names.
billionaires either. That's a,
Well, I
it's a
mean,
good point. Like things
well,
used to work that way. And
well, I mean, they were a millionaire back then is today's billionaire. Um, that kind of
but the
thing.
point is they still did it and they don't anymore,
I, I disagree. I think they do.
These are things in the past. Like
No, I mean, Bill Gates. There you go. There's a name right there. Bill Gates.
hmm, hmm.
That their foundation. Like that there's that. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who do that, and but I don't think. I mean, wow,
He's
this is a
donating
quite
his
the
entire fortune to
huh?
his own foundation.
Yeah. Well,
But
but the foundation presumably does good stuff.
hmm.
And but I don't think. I guess I don't feel like people have to. And who
I,
are
I
you
I
to
know
just
that's
go
like your
take?
sticking point. It's the autonomy thing. Like, they don't have to. They should.
And that's okay. So don't go with force of arms and take it from them. Encourage them. Make a compelling argument for people that want to do that, or
That's what
shame
I
people
did,
for not doing it. Yeah,
and
yeah.
nobody listened.
Well, that's one of the problems with what we do here.
Mhm.
Oh man,
Yeah, there's a comment here about Carnegie and Gates. I mean, like, yeah, there's always dirt on these people, and like going back to what I was saying about my challenge is like you could keep $1 billion, get rid of the rest of it, and live whatever life you want to live. Fuck off to whatever island you want, retire, have the life that you've always imagined, and let other people pull themselves up by the bootstraps because they then have more access to resource, you
well,
know?
here's something too. Now, I would encourage everybody, or you to compare all of these top wealthy people, compare their net worth to how much liquid cash they have.
No, that
Um,
doesn't matter.
what? What do you mean?
It doesn't matter because, like, well, it's all liquid in the sense that, like, it's stocks or houses, like, they
Okay,
can be
well,
sold.
okay, if like so,
Nobody thinks they have Scrooge McDuck bins full of cash.
no.
Nobody thinks that.
Do you know the implications of somebody like Jeff Bezos selling off all of Amazon, like all at once, or selling properties and things? Well, first off, well, and then there's so many problems with
What
that.
would
But
that
like,
would that be making things harder for Amazon so that small businesses could have a chance to thrive? Oh
it'd
no.
probably tank the company.
Oh no.
Well, see, this is a lot of emotive
No, 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 like
processes.
there's there's nothing saying that a business has a right to exist. Humans have a right to exist.
Oh, that's
If
actually a good. Wait, there's a good. No, I agree. I agree with you on that.
Yeah,
There's a good comment here. But it's never really been about money. It's about power. I completely,
no,
wholeheartedly agree. And yes, the two are interconnected, but you don't necessarily have to have money to have power. And that's why I generally don't say the billionaires or the wealthy. I say the elites. It's the
mm,
people up in the ivory tower that are pulling the strings and controlling the system. And yes, there is money connected with it. But
I'm pretty sure none of them don't have a lot of money.
well, but they don't have to. Some people don't have that much money. Like you could be a millionaire and still be a big cheese within the in the system of billionaires and other people.
Yeah, I mean, like power comes from money or fear. That's kind of
Yeah,
about it, like so. Unless you're like the world's greatest ninja, I think you would probably need a fair amount of money behind you.
yeah. I mean, it is they are interconnected for sure. Um, but we should probably. I mean, I don't know. We've probably deviated long enough that we could just consider this a half and half episode. But it certainly is. I think there's a sense of despair when people have very little and they're struggling to make ends meet, and then they see these people who are living large and just blowing money left and right. And how does that going to make somebody feel? You know,
Mhm.
and it's certainly for sure. I mean, I see this all the time. It creates resentment. People resent other people who have a bunch of stuff, especially when it seems like it came easy, which it doesn't always do. Sometimes not. It's just it's not black and white.
Okay,
But
so like even if they don't have it easy, like I don't know how to properly explain this, like it's just like the argument like okay, just because you have white skin doesn't mean you have an easy life,
mhm,
but in a relative sense, and this is why you can't just poo-poo comparison across the board, like in
mhm.
a relative sense, black people do have harder chances just based on that melanin.
Well,
And
it may actually
and
not be
so like
based on.
in the same right, like
Actually,
yeah,
I
like you might work hard and become rich, let's say. But then there's rich, and then there's like, like really fucking rich. And it's
Like
like there's
basketball players or
the
football
diminishing,
players.
there's a diminishing return on how much work you can do to earn money that is reasonable to anybody, right? Like
Yeah,
if
well,
if 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 a plumber came over and said, "Yeah, I can fix that, but it's $10,000 a second," you'd be like, "Oh, fuck no." But Amazon doesn't exist because they're selling anything for 10,000 a second. They're just getting a large amount of profit for each item and taking most of that profit for themselves and giving a little bit of the profit to the rest of the people that do the actual
which
work day
which
to
they're
day.
entitled to do. It's their
That's
business.
exploitation.
That's not
They may be
exploitation.
entitled to do it, but they're assholes for it.
Exploitation generally involves involuntary extraction that you have no choice but to do it, like being a slave or something. That's exploitative. Uh,
In a way,
Now,
that's
I also
exactly
want to.
what's happening though. Like you have to work, and like I was saying, it's not as easy as walking out the door and boom, getting another job, especially when you're living paycheck to paycheck.
But we've
You're
already
still
covered this. You have many options. You can start a business.
That's
Now,
even fucking harder.
it
That's
is,
a terrible
and that's the
idea.
government's fault.
That's a
It's the fucking.
terrible idea.
It's the
Starting your
government's
own
fault.
business is like ill-advised.
I know plenty of people who freelance and are quite well off. They're doing quite well. They don't even have a regular business. They just freelance, do odd jobs here and there, and they're doing just fine. Like it is possible. Like you can't be a dunce. And that's maybe where the education system again has failed people because they don't know how to do these things. Um, and that's sad. It's a sad
I
state of
I
affairs.
do know freelancers that do well, and what they end up doing usually is they get laid off from a job,
Mhm.
and then that job is like, oh shit, we shouldn't have laid them off. And then they're like, well, you can hire me as a contractor,
Yep.
and they
Yep.
exploit the former employer.
Yep. Yep. Because they're charging more than they were getting paid in wages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Eh,
the only way they end up making more money. But if
Yeah.
you go and start like get a business license and get a brick and mortar place and have an idea and go to a bank with a business plan and all this shit, like that's a lot of freaking work and you probably won't even see a return for a couple of
No,
years,
but this is true. But you again, you can freelance. That's a perfectly reasonable option. And you could diversify. I would honestly think that's a better way to live. Is just you. Okay, I got a pizza. I do pizza delivery for a couple hours a day, but I also do like go on Fiverr and do graphic design or something. Whatever your skill set is, you can monetize that very easily. Um, and so there are options there. So, well, oh, I wanted to also bring up because you said like, oh, black people, like if you have more melanin, you're automatically like in a worse off place economically. I disagree.
No, that's not what I
Um,
meant, but
well, but like opportunities and stuff. So there are
yeah,
people like native black people who like descendants of slaves and people who have lived here since a long time ago. Um, they tend to not do so well. But there are people who come here from other countries, you know, black people who came here fresh and they do perfectly fine. It's a cultural thing, honestly. And that's a sad state. Oh,
yeah, it's all
it,
intertwined though.
it
Like
is. Well, yeah, but it's a culture thing and like but again, none of this is simple. There's not like one answer to everything. It's a broad topic. Like there's so many different angles, and there's no way to just say it's only this or it's only that or this is the way it is. Like actually, it could be a couple different ways at the same time. You can actually have things that are two seemingly conflicting ways concurrently existing when it comes to the way the economy works. It's not a machine. That's the important thing. It's human beings generally.
the comments are getting interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless everyone gets a house, medical, education, and food, no questions, then it's exploitation. And
I
FYI, it's not a new observation. Teddy Roosevelt said it the year he died. It's
well,
interesting.
and maybe I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I do kind of agree with that. I don't know if I'd call it like straight up exploitation, but all those things do absolutely need to be.
Well, okay. it isn't
provided.
exploitation if everybody doesn't get a house, because like you're not entitled to that as a human being, as by nature, right? You build a house. That, like, if I crash landed somewhere, on some island, like, I'm not going to sit there and lament the fact that I'm not automatically given a house. No, I got to fucking build one. I got to build shelter. Like, but now if somebody gets in the way of me building shelter, that's a problem, and that's government again. Because it's like, I can't just, like, on land that I own, I can't just go build a house. I got to ask permission to do it and pay money to ask permission. And I got to do it the way they want me to do it. And that's
Right.
bullshit. I should be able to build whatever the hell I want to build on my little plot of land, you know?
This
And
this caveman stuff about like having to do all the hard work in order like to not be entitled or some shit
what?
like rights are entitlements.
No, no, they're not.
They're
Well,
exactly the same thing.
no,
Like,
there's two different sides to things. And maybe terminology could be a factor there. Cause it's like, so
well,
a right generally exists in the negative, and entitlements exist in the positive. So, and you could call it whatever. We could give new names if you want. We could
yeah, you
call it,
just phrase something and it becomes a negative or a positive, just
well,
depending on how you phrase it.
well,
But
no,
you're
no,
talking about the same thing.
no, you're not. So,
People
okay,
aren't entitled to a house. People have a right to a house. Like
all
how
right,
you're how
okay.
you're explaining things, and it's playing with words, and
Do,
it's muddying the waters. It's
no,
getting
no,
way
no.
off the
This is,
point.
you can look it up in the dictionary if you want. I mean, there are
I have.
definitely
They mean the same
differences.
thing.
No, they don't. Okay. So, okay, let's try to figure this out here. Um,
Well, I
like,
want to make a
let's.
point
Okay,
here.
well, I want to finish what I was saying though, but like, because why there has to be two different things, the negative and the positive. The negative is a preventative measure. Like, you can't get in the way of, like, the Second Amendment, right? I have a right to self-defense. Yes. So that means they can't get in the way of me having the means to self-defense. That doesn't mean the government has to buy me a gun. The First Amendment doesn't mean the government has to buy me a inkjet printer or something so I can print my little newsletter. Like, no, they just can't get in the way of that. That's the negative side of things. The positive is where somehow a resource is dispensed. So,
Mhm.
and that has to come from somewhere. So that's why it's the positive,
Okay. So
because it has to be provided, which means it has to be made, or
right,
whatever.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So the
And that,
government uh, uh makes it so that the economy is kind of fucked up, right? Like you would agree with that,
I
right?
absolutely
So
100%.
okay. So
Wholeheartedly, I do concur.
okay. So I want to draw a few parallels here because in the Second Amendment arguments we've had,
Mm-hmm.
um, you have you have stated that the government putting like qualifiers on which firearms you get and things like that
Mm-hmm.
are obstructing the Second Amendment, right?
It's an infringement. Yeah.
It's an
Yeah.
infringement. So if your ability to make the money that you need to get the shelter that you actually need to live,
Mm-hmm.
like is caused by the government, aren't they infringing upon
I,
that right?
oh, 100%. No, I
because
agree.
because we
That,
don't have a shortage of these things. It's not like you have to go out and chop down the tree and build it yourself like we did way back in the day. There are enough empty houses to fill all the homeless people
there are
and
actually,
be left over.
no,
And
no, dude. Here's where our two, philosophies converge. I completely agree there. And having driven from Tacoma all the way to Winnemucca, Nevada, there is so much empty space, so much land out there, just
hmm,
millions and millions of acres that I drove through. It's just like, where you can get water, of course, and people can build. I see all these little homesteads and farms and stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
And even around in Tacoma, for instance,
But you
this
don't
is
even
where
have to build.
no, but you can. People want to build, but they're not allowed. You can only build in certain places, and you can only build certain things. Like that has to end. If that ends, the problem will end up
I mean,
getting
it
solved.
should end,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to solve the problem
What do
because
you?
the resources are already there and available.
Maybe not in Tacoma or
But
Seattle.
let's
Actually,
let's not
Seattle
get
would
too
be.
complicated and
Well, no,
and
no, just places that are expensive to live.
yeah,
You
like
know.
let's try to think in concepts and not like cities, okay? Like
Okay.
exact cities, but uh, uh shit, I'm losing my train of thought.
There's vacant houses. That's what you're saying,
Yeah,
or properties or something.
yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is like if you wouldn't find it fair if like you walked into a village and there was one king living there and he had 30 empty houses and he said, "You don't have a right to shelter. You have to build it." And you say, "Well, there's these empty houses here. I'll even pay you money for it." And he'd be like, "Okay, it's 10,000 rubles." And you'd be like, "Well, I only have 5 rubles." Well, you got to build your own then. And it's like, "Well, I can't even afford the materials." And, well, you got to go chop your own shit down. It's like he could just give you a fucking house.
but
Like
then, but then,
you
okay,
might
no,
think that's an entitlement, but what's wrong with entitlement?
well, that would be fine. But then what happens when the next person comes and the next and the next? And word gets around and they're like, oh, the king's giving away houses. Now all of a sudden there's no
Then the
house.
houses fill up and there's less fucking homeless people.
Well, but maybe they
And
weren't
there's
homeless at
and now
all.
there's people like actively contributing to the society and the community and the
Well, no, I know
economy.
there's certainly merits to what you're saying, but at the end of the day, the world owes you nothing. You are not owed anything at all. Maybe like your basic, you know, human rights, right? The
I do
fundamental
consider
things,
that a human right.
huh?
I do consider that a human right.
Well, okay. So who builds the houses? Who like who manages all that stuff? Where does it come from? What about food? What food, shelter, water? Like it isn't just it doesn't just spring out of the ether. And there's definitely not enough houses that are vacant to go around in a lot of places. And simply giving a house doesn't solve the problem, too, especially if you're
I
dealing with
I
other
couldn't build a house if I
factors.
wanted to. I don't know how to. In fact,
Yeah.
I don't even know that you alone could build a house and have the know-how to have it not fall down or spring a leak somewhere or something, right?
I could build a
You know,
small structure,
so
but nothing substantial.
so of course, like it's not about like having somebody hand you shit on a silver platter and it's at their expense of time and labor. It's communities.
No,
You're
no,
always talking about
no,
communities, and
no.
that's where this stuff comes
Yes,
from.
now I agree when it comes to that the community yes, communities do need to do this, but not when it comes to like not by force. A voluntary, like again, I'm kind of like
I
in the
mean, that would be
voluntarist
great.
camp.
I agree with you, and that was part of my challenge.
Yeah,
But the sad fact of the matter is, and I mean, if if people aren't being forced to do it and they aren't doing it voluntarily, but that's not exploitation or greed, what the hell is it?
it's just people doing what they do.
Hmm.
I mean, it's people operating within the
Doing
system
what they
as
do, but there's no name on it
well.
because
It's
putting a
it,
name on it would highlight how bad what they're doing is
I don't think
actually.
it's bad or good. It just is. It's what people are doing what they're allowed to do. That's simply all it is.
Oh, people were once allowed to hold slaves.
And in that context, now
That's a
that's where
terrible argument.
that's no, but that's where it comes down to morality, ethics, and the law and stuff. And it's like, well, okay, things could be addressed in that regard.
Right.
But I,
Well, that's
like,
what's so aggravating to me about this is it's not ethical.
well, I mean, not really, no. But if I
Things
let's
that
say
are injustices really rub me the wrong way, and that's why it angers
I,
me so much.
no, I agree. Well, okay, let's say, okay, I know how to fix cars, right?
Yeah.
Okay, if I have free time and I'm just chilling on a Saturday, right, and just kind of playing video games, and you come to me and you're like, "Hey, you know how to fix cars? You got to fix my car because I can't afford it, and I need to get to work." And I'm like, "Well, this is my day off. I'm trying to relax." And you're like, "No, you know how to fix cars. You better fix it because you know how to do it and you have that skill. So give it to me." Like, is that fair? Like, if I worked for a certain amount of money and I have a certain amount, like, my job pays me and I'm saving up for something or whatever, and I have a little bit extra, is somebody else automatically entitled to that extra? Or am I allowed to acquire extra?
Uh, okay, so like for one thing, that's a rude way of doing things.
What is?
Like if just being like you have to do this, like what what how different does the scenario look if they come to you and ask you nicely, especially if there's someone your
That
friend,
that would be that would be different. But let's say just a random person on the street, you know, that just comes, knocks on my door. And it's like, I saw you working on cars. Must know what you're doing. You got to help me fix this car. Maybe if they make a plea, right? I might be
Exactly.
like, okay, well, I'll take this day of rest that I was going to do, and I'll go help you because you're a fellow human being, and I'll do what I can.
That's
Um,
the whole integrity coin thing I was thinking of. Is like for a situation like that, like if you're in
mhm.
need and you see someone who can help you, but they don't know you, like that
Yeah,
would help in a
and this is
situation like that.
where the community can do that, and this is I think what we're up against here is systemic structures that
Yeah,
you can't get around, where you're saying, oh, we should have tax money basically giving houses to people and giving stuff to people, when it's like, okay, I'm working a day a week for the fucking government. Like, uh, that, ouch, that hurts, like, that's a lot of money that they're extracting out of me, and every time I buy something they extract more. Like, okay, maybe there's a better way. So
mm,
I I think maybe we can agree on this, that the whole structure ought to be dismantled completely and
yep,
rebuilt. That is
yep.
probably the only way, because what you're suggesting, what I believe you're suggesting, is like government housing, essentially, and government, like, food and like basically
I don't want it to
minimum
come
stuff.
off so literal, like, oh, let's just assign empty houses to homeless people. It's more about how that highlights that supply and demand is not actually operating without heavy manipulation.
Well, there is, okay. There's okay. Supply and demand is operating as it's expected to operate, but yes, there is a lot of manipulation within the market, within the economy. That is definitely present, and that is probably the crux of the problem, I would say, is all that manipulation. It's not allowed to work on its own. It's like people are
Yeah.
down in there fiddling around,
Yeah,
pulling things out for themselves.
like in a practical, rational scenario, if you had that many empty houses and that many people needing houses, you would expect them to drift into an affordable range for the people that need them.
Yeah, that's true. And that's where there's certainly some manipulation
And
going
yeah, they
on
might be then
in
at a
housing,
loss,
in
for whoever
particular.
built it, but
Well, yeah,
that's how the market should work.
it and it generally would if it wasn't being messed with. That's the
Right.
problem. Like, external forces, that, and yeah, that is certainly a problem. But I guess my point is, there isn't a way, or I guess it's kind of ineffectual to keep the system around that exists and try to add to it to improve things. That's actually going to make it worse. It will not improve. It's going to get worse. the more you try to stack things on, like basically what I guess what I'm saying is this current structure is like a house that is old and there's water that's gotten in, there's mold everywhere, there's been like termites eating away at stuff, the foundation is crumbling. It's like, okay, why would you add to that? Why would you add on to that house? Just get rid of it. It's falling apart. It's going to fall. Don't put another coat of paint on it. That's stupid. I mean, that's politics, basically. It's like there's this rotten house, and we keep putting a blue coat of paint, then a red coat of paint, expecting it to suddenly be like, oh my God, it's a brand new house. Like, no, it's the same old fucking house it was. Dude.
I mean, subsidization could actually help with a lot of the problems surrounding that because, the people who sunk whatever money into that house
Mhm.
are then getting a little help from the government, and the person going into the house is getting a little help from the government. And in kind of like in a long run pay back into the system sort of way, they're then able to get up on their feet, get a
Mhm.
job, contribute to the economy, buying stuff and producing
I,
labor and
I
goods.
think that no, actually there is value in that. And I
Yeah.
think I would feel
So it's not a
I
handout.
would no, I would feel better about the resources that have been taken from me going to that
Yeah.
if it was done correctly
It's
and not
investment.
well yeah, if it was done in that manner, but it currently is not, and that's really the
Hmm.
problem. It's like it's a mess.
Yeah.
It's
They're
totally a
not
mess.
really doing that at all. There's like
No,
Section 8 and that's it. Like in
that
Washington.
no, that's like, oh my God, yeah. That's
Yeah.
terrible. No, you're right, and there's certainly better ways to do things, but you know why they don't do that? Because they can't benefit from it. Like the elites, the system itself, the bureaucrats, they can't personally benefit when they actually do good and solve a problem.
I
That's the thing.
mean,
Homelessness is never going to go away when government is doing things, because the, that justifies the existence of the government doing that,
but
you
that
know?
that circles back around to the point of diminishing returns.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing you can do to benefit someone who already has everything. Like, so that isn't even the point. It shouldn't even be the point anymore. Like that, like a normal functioning brain that has that much excess and sees suffering and doesn't do anything with that excess to ease that suffering is like, there's something wrong there. I won't put a name on it, but there's something
Okay,
not
and
right with that.
maybe here I'm going to try to take a different perspective. The perspective of that person.
Hmm.
Perhaps they don't see the suffering. Perhaps they live in a bubble where they only know their own world and they don't actually see all the details, the minutia, the things that we see on the ground level. They're up in the ivory tower.
Ah,
It's like we're like remember back in
so
the
we
day.
need to do a Clockwork Orange thing and like,
Well, and remember back in I remember this probably it was like in the early 2000s or something when gas was $4 a gallon and George W. Bush was president, and there was a reporter that asked him like, well, what are you going to do to try to ease people's suffering because gas is $4 a gallon? What are you going to do about that? And he stops and he looks and he's like, gas is $4 a gallon? That's news to me, because he's not
yeah.
buying gas. He's like, it's like there's a
Right.
disconnect there, and I think
Well, in that
that's
geographical reach that we've talked about before, like he can't know where, like the middle of South Carolina, how much they're paying for gas. Like
exactly,
you
yeah.
wouldn't
Well,
expect it.
I think a lot of people who come up from the ground level um, and get to like people who had very little
Hmm.
in the early days, but then they become a billionaire. They tend to be the most philanthropic
Yeah.
generally, whereas the people who are kind of like born into that world generally don't, because they never have actually seen that. and
Yeah.
and maybe
Well, and that's a further argument for like distributing one's excess,
Mhm.
at least beyond a certain point, because then that spills over and creates senses of entitlement
Mhm.
in next generations and stuff. And that's what we're seeing from like the Carnegies and stuff like that is like they may have had really great intentions with all their money, but whatever got left over then spoiled the fruits of their trees, you know.
Well, so now here's the thing. This is a very common psychological human trait, and
Mhm.
it's the lottery effect essentially.
Yep.
There's a better name for it. Um, but when people come into a bunch of money who don't know how to manage money, they lose it all almost immediately. There was a somebody. Oh God, I'm trying to remember the name. It's a pretty big company in the Seattle, Tacoma, like Washington area, but the kids of this family or the owner of this company, they got the inheritance, and it was lots of money, a lot
Mhm.
of money. Well, they burned it all, not literally, but I mean, they basically built this dumbass house that was like the most obscene, stupid ass house imaginable. And they were basically out of money in the course of a couple of years. Like the parents built this up over decades,
Mhm.
and then it was handed off to the kids. And like in the matter of moments, all of it was gone. And
And for
of
nothing.
course, well, it went back into the economy, essentially. It just kind of dissolved back because they bought a bunch of shit. And there you go. And I mean, what a waste. But
Yeah.
it's like that ends up happening most of the time, like all the time. And granted, some people do carry forward, it depends, but
Mhm.
generally not. Um, so it isn't like it persists indefinitely, at least not here. It isn't
Right.
like royalty in other countries and stuff like that,
Mhm.
where that does persist generationally. Um, but
I would at least think that it would be fair, you know, so like to give some accommodation to this idea that you shouldn't be forcing these people to do what they don't want to do with their money, right?
mm-hmm.
Because it is their money by
Yeah,
by legal rights, let's say.
sure, yeah.
However they came about it, but why not then have it just be, you know, up, upon their death, then like rather than like letting them just decide exactly where all of it goes, say like, you know what, a certain percent just has to like go to like the rest of us,
Well,
and
in the US there is that. It's called the estate tax.
yeah, but it's not that much,
It's like 50%, something around there. It's really high. It's a huge amount. Now, of course, there's a government solution that you
And
can
there's
start.
write-offs and stuff like
Well,
that.
no, you know what they do is people will create a trust, and
Right.
that's how they circumvent that. So that again, there you go. There's a government thing getting in the way of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. I feel like from a community standpoint, and maybe because I think the solution is humanitarian and psychological. It doesn't have to be uh, well, like it's basically making good arguments and changing society um, at the ground level. Because if we as a society built ourselves around a different philosophy, then things would operate differently. Like
Mhm.
you go to places like Japan, and in their culture, theft is like that puts a stain on your family name essentially. So you generally in most places in Japan, you could leave your laptop or your backpack just sitting somewhere and no one's going to touch it
Mhm.
because they know that if somebody sees them grabbing that they're going to be shamed, dishonored, and that carries into the family too. And it's like that isn't a government thing. The government doesn't
It's a
play
similar
any
culture
part
here
in that.
in Germany
Yeah.
too. Like lost
Mm-hmm.
stuff, people will put it somewhere where it's easily seen,
Mm-hmm.
thinking, "Oh, someone's going to come back looking for this," and
Yeah.
like that's totally a thing I see all the time here. Like,
And that is and maybe that's again that like we can have this kind of community involvement and improvements to things
well,
by doing that, by changing culture, changing society,
There's an
like
important factor that builds that culture though, and that's the lack of need. Like the reason that people steal things is because they're like, oh, you know what? I could really use this. You know,
not
like
a hundred
if you
percent.
see a laptop laying over there, but you already have a laptop, you're not going to be like, like, oh yeah, I just want a second laptop for no particular
Some people
reason. Like,
do.
I mean, some people do, but like
Yeah.
you're
I mean,
less likely, like in the brain, like the chemicals and the psychology, like when it sees something that it needs and could use, it automatically covets it, and if it's not yours and that, but like that overpowers it, that's where the theft,
well,
like
I
it's
don't think it's like a universal thing. There's plenty of people out there who they have enough and they still steal, or they steal things that have nothing
yeah,
to
they're
do with the needs.
CEOs.
Huh? What's that?
They're called CEOs.
They're also called politicians.
Yeah.
But I mean, well, CEOs are paid though by the anyway. I mean, just in general, like some people do steal out of need, some people don't. It's not a universal thing. Um,
No, but like
and I
not
don't think
everybody's
everybody
homeless because of mental health either.
true. And that's
Some are,
but
but
this goes back to what I was saying earlier, in that like there is no one approach to solve things, and there is no one cause for every problem. Like the there are a variety of factors, and those all have to be considered and weighed. And and so because the way things maybe appear, it's possible. Well, in general, in fact, most people tend to sort of look at things through their own sort of filter, their own, like, in fact, a lot of times your expectations almost generate the image that you see, or whatever your perception of something. um and and that's kind of bad, right? Like we should always be aiming for things to be as accurate and truthful as possible, because, well, hey, you know what, if you want to say, I mean, I do this every day with troubleshooting. I can't be speculative and be like, oh, I want it to be this way, or I just simply believe it. It's like, no, I got to actually know what the actual cause is. And feelings, feeling it's a certain way won't give me the solution. I won't fix it if I just simply go on that. I need facts. I need truth. I need to know exactly what the problem is in
mm,
order to be able to fix it.
but the
Especially because
speculation can guide the hypothesis at
it
least.
can, and but it has to be like, it can't be wild speculation. It has to be like educated speculation. Like, you know, people trying to do what I do, if they look at like, oh, there's this thing that isn't working, they may come up with completely different potential causes. Whereas me, I have experience, quite a lot of experience in what I do, and I could be like, oh yeah, I've seen this so many times, being the problem is probably this thing. And then I test that, right? Like, oh, okay, this is not working. I'll start with the thing that's most likely because I know that thing. But somebody else coming in might be like, oh, well, maybe it's this thing, some other thing that probably isn't the problem. And then they're going to be wasting time and maybe resources, like replacing stuff for no reason and burning time. When you know enough about something, you can come up with a better potential cause, and potential solution. And so it goes back again. It goes back to education, and observation, and critical thought, trying to actually look deep into a thing and figure it out. Because I think that, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
oh, we have some comments, quite a few actually. But if 75% of a problem is one thing, deal with that first and see what the other 25%. This is true. But it's what you do to deal with it that is kind of important. Because like it's a whole like teach a man to fish thing. You give a man a fish versus teach a man to fish. um I'd rather teach a man to fish. I mean, obviously, like in the here and now, in the moment, yes, give the fish, but then while they're eating, teach them. Like it has to be changed structurally. Like we can't just simply do a thing because we recognize, like, oh yes, this is a problem. We'll just we'll like put a band-aid on it. No, no, no. We need to change the structure from the inside so that that never is a problem in the future. Or
Well,
if it becomes a problem, we can immediately solve it.
there's a problem here with statistics too, where the numbers can fuck with your head. Like if 75% of a problem is there's old rusty pipes in this apartment building and it's falling apart, but 25% of the problem is that the first floor is on fire right now. You want to focus
yes.
on 25%.
No, you are correct. Yes.
You know,
have
like,
to
so like in project
prioritize.
management, you say, okay, like here's things that need to be done now. Here's things that are super important. Here's things that are super important, but don't need to be done right now. And here's things that are not so important, but they definitely, definitely, definitely have to happen before anything else here can happen. And it's super complicated.
It
And it's
is. It's prioritizing.
off on the
Well,
wrong road.
you remember the algorithm, right, that I created when we were running the business for our tracker,
Yeah.
the PGT tracker thing,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
trying to figure out how to stick which things to stick in which order, and how I had like a long, almost it was like 10 feet long, 11 by 17 strip, like papers taped together with like this huge kind of diagram and flow chart, and it worked.
Yeah.
But that's, yeah, it's hard to prioritize.
If then, when, if, when,
Yeah.
when, then.
Well, because it's like certain things, like how do you, because you want to be efficient, right? Obviously, like efficiency is key, because otherwise you're just wasting resources and time, when time is a resource too. So obviously, like if there's a fire, time is of the essence.
Right.
You know, you don't want to sit there and try to bust out my RPN calculator here and let's try to figure that out.
But you also have to be creative and quick thinking. If this is an empty apartment building, right? And you're like, oh shit, like how much money do we have to sink into this to fix all these pipes? And oh look, the building's on fire. Oh, I better call the fire department real quick.
Yeah.
Oh, yep, things burning. Oh shit.
Yep. Maybe that solves the problem.
I solved a couple problems.
Yep. Exactly. Maybe I'll call my insurance company first and up the oh man.
You like roll back the clock on your phone so that the timestamp of your call was yesterday. And you're like, no, look, I called you guys yesterday.
Oh man. Yeah, man, we're almost like 2 hours in. I think we've covered.
It's probably a good point to wrap up, I guess.
Lots of good comments though. So that's cool. Thank you for that, Victoria. Always great. Almost too much to keep up with when we have our own things that we're talking about. We need a third party to manage that.
Yep.
But yeah, that's a good, amazing that we how we changed from like two completely different things,
Yeah, from suicide to economic structures
and then like just society.
But like all these things link together.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's all interconnected, and I mean, I firmly believe that the most important thing that we should be doing is building communities, encouraging that, because that'll really solve problems. When you have people who don't have to be told to do something, who just do it, like just because they're like, oh, well, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
We would live in a much better world, like we wouldn't need any kind of structure, essentially, because I mean, it's me, it's the way I believe. I don't like the idea of structure. As an anarchist, I don't think we need that. I think human beings can live perfectly fine and get along perfectly fine without a whole bureaucracy behind people. And the best way to do that is to build communities and connect people, like, and encourage people to do the right thing and to do good for their fellow human beings. Yeah.
Yeah.
So see you guys next week. Careful, I may get accused of being social. It's good. Yeah, I think
A lot of propaganda has gone into vilifying that concept, but
that's true.
all
Yeah,
we have is our community. And
true.
that's all socialism is like helping each other out and getting help yourself, like because we all need a helping hand at some point.
Oh
Maybe
yeah, I
not
mean,
today, maybe not for the last 10 years, but
mhm.
one day it's going to come and
And that's where both of us agree on the goal for
mm,
sure. Like I don't want things to be bad for people. I want things to be good for people. That's like I want a flourishing world where it's peaceful and prosperous. And yeah, it's just a matter of approaches. And this is where I love this kind of discussion.
mm. All
Yeah,
right. Well,
Washington. I miss Washington. Yeah,
I do too.
good. It's a good place. I always complain about the rain, but I never leave.
Mhm. Yeah, I do miss Mount Rainier.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. And
never
like
got tired of seeing that.
this time of year, it's really nice. It's beautiful. I mean, it's like probably going to be 80 today. So, it's a little toasty, but still, yeah, it's good. Good place.
Yeah,
Good place. It's just expensive.
right.
Jesus. That's the, oh, man. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching and commenting and everything. It's great. We have always have interesting conversations
Yep.
as ever. Yeah.
Well,
Well,
if you're so inclined, click the link to pre-order the album and enjoy it with us next week, hopefully, if
yep. Hopefully.
all the technical
Fingers
things
crossed.
end up working out.
Yep. And yeah, we have merch too. So, you
Yep.
want any of that stuff, we got that. And, of course, leave comments, carry on with the conversation too. And yeah,
Yep. Yep.
we will be back next week for more interesting things.
Oakley
All right.
dokley.
All right. So I think, why don't you stop the stream then? Yep. Okay. Are we stopped?
Yep.
All right. Groovy. Cool.